Good evening, sweetheart. It's Maggie. Come sit with me. Let's make this night a gentler one. Tonight arrived quietly. No rain, no wind asking questions at the windows. Just the kind of still January evening that feels like it has already taken off its coat. I noticed it the moment I closed the door behind me. That sound echoed a little longer than usual, as if the house wanted to make sure the day stayed on the other side. I set my things down slowly, not because I was tired, but because the night felt like it deserved careful movements. The lamp was already on, that warm yellow glow I always forget to turn off before sunset. It waited for me. I moved toward the table and reached for the kettle, letting the habit guide my hands. Chamomile again. Some evenings don't want surprises. As the tea steeped, I opened the small drawer beside the chair, not looking for anything in particular, just opening it. That's when I saw it. A cream-colored envelope, edges softened by time, my handwriting slanting slightly to the right, the way it always does. When I'm writing something, I don't want to rush. I didn't pick it up right away. I've learned that some things need to be noticed before they're touched. The tea was ready. I poured it carefully, the steam lifting slowly into the lamplight. I stirred once. Twice would have been impatience. When I finally sat down, the envelope was still there, waiting, not accusing, not calling, just present. Lily patted over and curled at my feet, her movements soft and deliberate. She has a way of settling into evenings, like she knows exactly how long they're meant to last. I picked up the cup and took a small sip. The tea was warm, not hot, already easing into that gentler temperature I prefer. Only then did I lift the envelope. It was lighter than I remembered. Paper always is, isn't it? It holds so much, yet weighs almost nothing. I turned it over once, then again. No address, no stamp, just my handwriting and his name. I won't read it tonight. I didn't read it then either. This isn't the kind of letter that asks to be opened. I rested it on my lap for a moment, feeling the faint texture of the paper through the envelope. The lamp caught its edge, turning it a softer shade of gold. It's strange how certain objects wait patiently for years without changing their intention. They don't rush you. They don't demand closure. They simply remain. I wrote that letter on an ordinary evening. Nothing dramatic happened that day. No argument, no farewell, no sense that time was running out. Just a quiet urge to put something down on paper before it slipped past me. I remember thinking, I'll give this to him when the words feel finished. They never quite did, and somehow that felt right. The steam from my tea drifted upward again, thin and pale, twisting gently in the lamplight. I watched it rise until it disappeared. Some things are like that. They show themselves briefly, then leave behind a warmth you can't quite explain. I placed the envelope back on the table, beside the cup, not hiding it, not displaying it, just letting it share the space. Lily sighed, the deep, satisfied kind. And as the room settled around us, I realized something simple. This letter didn't come back into my evening to be sent. It came back to be remembered. We'll sit with it a little longer. There's no hurry tonight. I didn't always know why that letter stayed where it was. For a long time, I assumed there must have been a reason big enough to name. Fear, timing, cowardice. But sitting here tonight, with the cup warming my hands and the lamp keeping watch, I realized the truth was much quieter than that. I never sent the letter because I wasn't finished becoming the woman who wrote it. That sounds complicated, I know, but it didn't feel complicated then. It felt unfinished. I wrote it on a night much like this one. January again. No rain. The house calm enough that I could hear the kettle before it whistled. He was in the other room, reading or pretending to read. I remember the way the page turned slower when he was tired. I sat at the table with a pen that skipped slightly, the kind I never liked, but kept using anyway. The words came easily at first, not the dramatic kind, just honest ones. The kind you write when you're no longer trying to be impressive. I wrote about ordinary things, about mornings we'd shared without saying much, about the way he always forgot where he left his glasses, even when they were right on his head. I wrote about gratitude that didn't need applause. But somewhere in the middle of the page, my hand slowed. The pen hovered. There were things I wanted to say that didn't yet have safe shapes. Not accusations, not confessions, just truths that needed more air around them. So I stopped, not because I was afraid, because I was listening to the quiet inside me that said, "Not yet." That voice has always been soft, but it's never been wrong. I folded the letter carefully, once, then again, slid it into the envelope, and sealed it without licking the edge. I never liked the taste of glue. I told myself I'd come back to it. Tomorrow, next week, when the words felt finished. They never did, and strangely, neither did I. I've learned something over the years. Some letters aren't meant to be sent because they're not messages. They're mirrors. They show us who we are in the middle of becoming. And if you send them too soon, you interrupt the process. I take another sip of tea. It's cooler now, but still kind, like something that understands waiting. Lily shifts her weight slightly, pressing closer, as if to say, "You're here. That's enough." I glance at the envelope again. It doesn't feel heavy. It never has. It feels patient. I think that's why I never sent it. Not because I was holding back, but because the letter was holding space for a version of me that wasn't done arriving yet. And tonight, I'm grateful it waited. I never opened the letter again, not because I forgot what it held, but because I remembered too well the feeling of writing it. There are some things you don't need to reread to know exactly where they live. I knew what that letter wanted to say without seeing the words. It wanted to say thank you in ways I didn't yet know how to speak aloud. Not the polite kind, the deeper kind, the kind that arrives after years of ordinary days stacked quietly on top of one another. It wanted to say that love doesn't always look like warmth. Sometimes it looks like patience. Sometimes it looks like staying, even when nothing romantic is happening. It wanted to say that I noticed the way he always locked the door twice at night, the way he stood a little closer to me in crowded places without touching, the way he listened with his whole body, even when his face pretended otherwise. But there were other sentences too, the unfinished ones, the ones I stopped writing because they didn't know how to land gently yet. Sentences about the quiet distances that grow inside long marriages, not dramatic distances, just the small spaces where you stop asking certain questions because you already know the answer might change things. I wanted to tell him that sometimes I felt lonely even when he was right there, not as blame, just as truth. I wanted to tell him that I didn't always know how to ask for the kind of tenderness I was missing. Those sentences stayed half-formed, not because they were dangerous, but because they deserved time. Time I thought I had plenty of. I take another sip of tea. The warmth moves slowly now, settling rather than spreading. I watch the lamplight catch the rim of the cup, turning the porcelain into something softer. And I think about how words are the same way. They change depending on the light you hold them in. If I had sent the letter, it would have frozen those words in the shape I was then. And I don't know if that shape was ready to last. I rest the envelope against my palm again. It feels thinner now, not because anything is missing, but because I'm no longer pressing against it. Lily lifts her head briefly, then settles again, as if she understands that some stories don't need to be told out loud to be complete. I think that's what the letter really held. Not sentences, not explanations, but permission. Permission to feel what I felt without demanding it be resolved. Some letters aren't meant to travel. They're meant to stay close, quietly reminding you that you were paying attention. And tonight, that feels like enough. There was a night, not long after I wrote the letter, when I held the envelope again and understood something quietly. It wasn't asking to be sent. It was asking to be pleased. I remember that evening clearly now, not because anything important happened, but because nothing did. He was already asleep in the other room, the house resting into its familiar nighttime shape. The lamp beside me hummed softly, the way it always does when it thinks I might stay awake a little longer. I sat at the table with the envelope in my hands and waited for the moment when urgency would appear. It didn't. I thought perhaps I would feel a pull, some sudden courage, some last-minute certainty, but all I felt was calm, not avoidance, not fear, just a quiet knowing that tonight wasn't the night. I folded the letter again, even though it was already folded. Some gestures aren't practical, they're reassuring. I slid the envelope back into the drawer, not deep, not hidden, just where it could breathe. The drawer made a soft sound as it closed, a sound that felt final without feeling dramatic. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary, listening. The house creaked lightly, settling into itself. It felt like agreement. That night, I slept well, not because something was resolved, but because something had been respected. Tonight, as I sit here again, years later, with the same envelope resting nearby, I realize how kind that decision was. Not just to him, to me. There's a misunderstanding that letting something go means pretending it never mattered. But that's not what this was. Putting the letter back wasn't erasing it. It was trusting it. Trusting that what it held didn't need immediate witnesses. I take another sip of tea. It's barely warm now, but still comforting. Some warmth doesn't need to last long to have done its work. Lily stirs slightly at my feet, then settles again. She always does that when the room grows quiet in a meaningful way. I look at the drawer now, closed and unremarkable. No weight pressing from inside it, just a presence. And I understand something I couldn't then. That night wasn't about choosing silence. It was about choosing peace over performance. And peace, when it's real, doesn't need an audience. Something curious happens when enough years pass. The letter stops feeling unfinished. It doesn't fade. It doesn't disappear. It simply changes its job. At first, I thought that letter existed to be read by him, by someone, by anyone. But over time, I realized it had already done exactly what it was meant to do. It listened. There are words we write, not because we need them heard, but because we need to hear ourselves say them. even if only once, even if only on paper. That letter held the version of me that needed to speak without interruption, without kindness, without correction. It let me say the things I didn't want answered, the things I didn't want fixed, the things I only wanted acknowledged. And once they were acknowledged, truly, they didn't need to travel anywhere else. I stir my tea gently now. The sound is soft, circular. It reminds me of how time works, not in straight lines, in returns. I think about how many versions of myself have lived in this house. The woman who wrote the letter, the woman who tucked it away, the woman who forgot it for years, the woman who found it again and smiled instead of aching. All of them are me. None of them were wrong. Sometimes I imagine what would have happened if I had sent it, not in regret, just curiosity. I think he would have listened. He always did. But listening and needing are two different things. The letter didn't need him anymore. It had already been received by the only person who truly needed its contents. Me. The cup warms my hands again, even though the tea has cooled. Funny how comfort lingers longer than heat. Lily sighs at my feet, a deep, satisfied sound. She doesn't know about letters, but she understands relief. I look around the room and realize how many objects here are quiet witnesses. The lamp, the drawer, the chair. None of them needed explanations. They simply held the moment until I was ready to hold it myself. That letter didn't become regret. It became proof. Proof that I was capable of speaking honestly without demanding resolution. And that kind of honesty, the kind that doesn't chase response, is rare and powerful. The letter was never meant to travel. It was meant to stay right where it taught me how to breathe again. I didn't put the letter back into the envelope, not right away. I let it rest on the table beside my cup for a while longer, as if it needed air. Some things, once opened, deserve a few extra minutes in the light. The lamp hummed quietly beside me, not brighter, not dimmer, just steady. That steadiness felt important tonight because the letter wasn't dramatic. It didn't end anything. It didn't begin anything new. It simply reminded me that love doesn't vanish just because a conversation never happened out loud. Love leaves other evidence in habits, in tone, in the way your hands still move carefully around things that once mattered to someone else. I folded the letter slowly, not with ceremony, just with care. Care feels different at this age. It's quieter, less urgent, but more honest. I slid it back into the envelope and placed it in the drawer again, not because I was hiding it, but because it belonged to a chapter that now knows where it lives. Lily stretched at my feet and let out a long, satisfied sigh, a kind that says, everything is where it should be. I wrapped my hands around my cup one last time. The tea was barely warm now, but warmth isn't only about temperature. Sometimes it's about recognition. I recognized myself tonight, not the younger woman who wrote the letter, not the woman who held on to it for years, but the woman sitting here now, the one who can remember without reopening the wound. There's a quiet kind of healing that doesn't announce itself. It just shows up one evening and says, you're allowed to carry this differently now. That letter didn't need to be sent because it arrived right on time, right where it was needed. I leaned back in the chair. The house settled around me the way it always does when the night is ready to close. If you're holding something tonight that was never said, know this: unspoken doesn't mean unresolved. Sometimes it simply means it found a quieter home. And now, sweetheart, the evening has done its work. The letter is resting. The tea is finished. The light is kind. Rest well tonight, sweetheart. Good night. From me, Maggie.